Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is really my privilege and pleasure to be speaking with you this evening on a topic that's of some interest to me, and I hope it will be of some interest and possibly some use to you as well. The only area of spiritual practice and teachings that I feel comfortable speaking about are the Buddhist teachings and the Buddhist tradition. In particular, the Theravada Buddhist tradition, which is the form of Buddhism in which I trained and practiced as a Buddhist monk for many years, and I found to be most useful, approachable, and rewarding for me. Of course, that's a subjective judgment, and it's not the same for everyone. But this evening, I wanted to talk about a particular discourse given by the Buddha, and it is one of the discourses that's often chanted by monks, especially on occasions which are of importance to the lay community, such as when there's the birth of a child, or moving into a new house, starting a new career. Whenever there's a transition into something new, quite often the lay community will invite Buddhist monks to attend a ceremony in which the lay people make offerings to the monks, and the monks then recite a number of discourses of the Buddha. And one of the most commonly chanted discourses is what is called the Mangala Sutta. Mangala is a word that is a little difficult to translate because it is in Pali. Pali was the language spoken, we think, in the Ganges Valley around the time of the Buddha, which was a very long time ago, 2,600 years ago. But it was a spoken language, and it still has roots in Sanskrit, very similar. A simplified version of Sanskrit, one could say. And it is the language in which the Theravada canon or scriptures are preserved. So when monks perform ceremonies and they do chanting, they often chant in this Pali language. And this is one of the discourses that is very popular throughout the Buddhist communities of, in particular, Southeast Asia. And it is an interesting discourse of the Buddha because it does have some very important guidelines for how we may approach life in order to gain well-being, happiness, and success. Now, the word Mangala can often be translated as blessing, but in actual fact, it has many variable meanings. Some of them are auspicious signs, omens, lucky signs, things that are indicating that there is some good fortune coming, or at least a way of divination of what the future is going to bring. And of course, this suggests that in the time of the Buddha, people were quite superstitious. And this, of course, is of no surprise, because I think from time immemorial, as I do believe that from the earliest of human existence, from the cave man and from whatever period one wants to go back to, the human experience has been one of a degree of trepidation or a degree of fear of the unknown. You can imagine sitting in a cave with a little fire, looking out into the vast expanse of the plains, and then there's lightning and thunder and wild beasts, and it's dark out there. Who knows what's going to happen? And so there is that fear, the fear of the unknown, not because it is unknown, but because we can put anything we like into the unknown, and we can put the most terrible possibilities. And because human beings are at a deep level aware and know that life is very uncertain, that we are not comfortable with this uncertainty of life, we have this natural tendency to feel fear and then want reassurance. And we seek reassurance from a variety of sources. And therefore, these blessings or omens and signs and one could say ceremonies and rituals evolved in all traditions in order to try and find some guarantee of success, security of success, protection from danger, protection from failure, protection from the unknown that is out there. And so there is this deep-seated, I think, insecurity, and one could also say inferiority complex within the human psyche, that we somehow are unable to really take charge of our own lives and have to rely on the external signs and blessings. And this was true in the time of the Buddha. And I do believe that it's still true today because of this great interest in various forms of divinations and signs. And now, this is not to dismiss or detract from the validity of some of these divination techniques. They may be accurate or they may not be accurate, but that's not the point. The point is that we feel this insecurity and fear and inferiority and want reassurance from something external. Now, the Buddha was not at all inclined to encourage that in the human spirit. The Buddha was one who highly regarded the human potential, the ability of the human being to take full responsibility for one's life, to be in charge of one's life and one's destiny, and not to empower something external. He always pointed back to oneself. And this is something which I think is very admirable. I think it does stress the power of the human being rather than stressing the external power of either deities or objects of power. And so, in the time of the Buddha lived in the Ganges Valley. There were many different traditions being practiced and people believed all sorts of things. They still had the caste system. The Brahmin caste was the higher caste, which the Buddha really separated himself from completely. He had no time for the caste system, and he saw the family of humanity and disregarded this separation of humans into caste by color, by status, by sex, by any distinction. And also, one of the practices of the Brahmin caste that is said is that, and this is reported or recorded in one of the discourses, is that one of the practices that the Buddha observed was that he observed this Brahmin in the morning go down to the Ganges Valley into the river to bathe. And again, in the evening, he would go down into the river to bathe. And this was, I think, a common practice in India at that time, and I think it is still present today, where people do consider that the waters of some of these holy rivers have efficacy and power to purify us. And so the Buddha asked the Brahmin, why do you do this? Why do you go into the river to bathe? And this has been recorded in a number of discourses where the Buddha encounters Brahmins doing this sort of purification ceremony. And they often say, well, in the morning I go and bathe in the holy Ganges in order to wash away any sins or evil deeds or bad karma that I may have done during the night. And in the evening I go down and bathe in the holy Ganges Valley to purify and wash away any evil deed or sin or bad karma which I may have done during the day. And so this was a common refrain. In other words, it's a purification ceremony. Is it useful? Well, I'd like to just read to you what the Buddha said to one of these Brahmins who performed this ritual. And by the way, I'd like to encourage you to maybe consider this book, The Word of the Buddha, What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. It is an excellent introduction to Buddhism. So, the Buddha then addressed one of these Brahmin priests who was performing this daily ritual of bathing in the river. And the Buddha said to him, in Bahuka, which was one of the rivers, or Gaya, another river, there the fool of black deeds may daily plunge, yet is never purified. What can these rivers do? They cleanse not the man guilty of hate and evil. For him who is pure in mind, any day is auspicious, any day is hallowed. Cleansed, pure in deeds, he always fulfills observances. So, Brahman, come and bathe here. Love all that lives. If you neither lie, nor slay, nor steal, are not greedy or a miser, but live in trust and gentleness, what use is there in going to bathe in that river? The water in your well at home will be quite sufficient. So this is the Buddha's attitude towards some of these ceremonies. He's not so interested in the ritual. He's interested in how we live. There's another example in another discourse that the Buddha gave, the Owada Sutta, which is given to a young man who the Buddha observed in the early morning doing prostrations and paying respect to the 6 directions, which was another common ritual, if you wish. And the Buddha asked him, what are you doing, paying respect to the east, west, north, south, up and below? Why do you do that? He said, well, my father told me to do it. It's a ritual that I have to perform. And the Buddha then went and said, well, that's not how you should venerate and worship these directions. And he gave him this lengthy discourse which involved how to undertake one's responsibilities in life and relate to people with whom one shares one's life. That is how we can venerate life and everything in existence. So these discourses, I think, do point to the Buddhist position or the Buddhist attitude towards rituals and ceremony. Now, unfortunately, even Buddhist people to this day perform a variety of ceremonies and rituals in order to gain blessings. And one of these, of course, is the Buddhist monks going to people's houses and doing these chants, such as this chant on the Mangala Sutta, the discourse on the highest blessings. But it is informative for us to maybe look at actually what the discourse says are the sources of blessings. What are the sources of conditions leading to well-being, leading to happiness? And we will find that they are actually quite ordinary things which have to do more with the way we live our lives, the virtues and the qualities that we bring to our lives, rather than some external forces and external omens. And the teachings that the Buddha presented in this Mangala Sutta are repeated in many other discourses of the Buddha. And of course, the Buddha taught for 45 years, so there are a great number of discourses, and he repeated many themes over and over again, which can be encapsulated in very short teachings. I imagine that if you want the Buddhist teachings in a nutshell, the best one is what they call the Owada Patimoka, which is the discourse that the Buddha gave to a large number of disciples. And it is so brief and yet so complete, I think it is difficult to think of anything more succinct. And this is just 3 lines. Avoid doing anything that is evil or unskillful. Do everything that is good and skillful, and purify your mind. And that is the Buddha's teaching. And not only Gautama the Buddha, but the teaching of all the Buddhas. And so that is, I think, a very good summary. Now, let us look at what actually the Buddha, told this particular. It was supposed to be a deva after a long period of consultations of what are the highest blessings and what are the best omens and what are the best signs for happiness. The deva went to the Buddha and asked him, "Venerable Sir, many deities and men yearning after well-being have pondered upon what blessings were. Pray, tell us what are the highest blessings." And again, remember this word blessings could mean omens, lucky signs, conditions conducive to well-being, success, happiness. And what does the Buddha say? He starts off, not to associate with the fools, but to associate with the wise. To honor those who are worthy of honor, this is the greatest blessing. So he starts off with this very simple statement. Not to associate with the fools, but to associate with the wise. Now, fools or foolish, and it can mean a person who has no values, a person who has no aspiration for ethics and values that are considered noble. It has got nothing to do with intelligence. It refers to a person's character. It refers to a person's value system. It refers to a person's behavior and lifestyle and what he or she endeavors to achieve in life. So in the Buddhist context, and the way that he would explain a foolish person is one who does not recognize probably the benefit of everything else he's going to be mentioning in this discourse. Does not recognize the value of virtue, does not recognize the value of generosity, does not understand the law of karma. One could say, of moral lack in moral values, and has values that are conducive to disharmony and conflict and even self-deterioration. So now, how do we know if somebody's foolish and somebody's wise? Of course, that is something that requires that you have been instructed or have some appreciation for what is worthwhile, what is good. And here, when I hear this particular verse, I'm reminded of the importance of the role of the environment and the role of family life and the role of the companions and the people with whom we find ourselves. You know, many people are born in situations which are extraordinarily challenging. I mean, if you are born in a place surrounded by people who live by the sword, live by strength of arm and are quite prepared to take advantage of others and exploit others and steal and do whatever they can to get by, it's very difficult. If that's the environment in which you have been born, it's very difficult to rise up out of that. And that is why I think in our society there is such a difficulty in overcoming some of the discrepancies in people's status in life. People who are born in very poor environments where they have very few opportunities for education, for health, for support, where they're just basically living in a jungle environment of survival of the fittest, it's very difficult for them to not follow that stream and continue along that stream. And it is the rare person who can rise up and move out of their environment and come to a position of better standing in society by actually getting education, by developing a career, by having a good profession and having good income and being able to take advantage of the benefits that society offers to those who are born in better situations. So, not to associate with fools, it does begin with being fortunate enough to be born in conditions where you have good guidance, you have good examples, parents who can look after you, parents who want to share with you values and teachings and guidance that are beneficial for you, that will help you rise up in life rather than sink down. And the Buddhists did say that one's parents are one's first teachers. They are our first teachers, and they have a great deal to do with our character and how we're shaped and what we are to become as we grow into adults. So that is an area where we may not have much say at present, is where we have been born, where we were born, or where somebody is going to be born. That is maybe something that we cannot change now. But now, who do we choose to associate with? And who do we choose to emulate? And who do we choose to take as guidance and examples? And of course, this is something that we need to consider carefully. Who do you want to associate with? People who are virtuous, people who respect others, people who have kindness in speech and conduct, people who are generous and giving, people who are honest and sincere, people who acknowledge faults and freely forgive? Or do you want to associate with people who just are out there to make the most money that they can for themselves and get whatever they want at whatever cost? This is for us to decide. The Buddha said that for happiness, it is better to associate with the wise and to honor those worthy of honor. What this means, of course, is to who do we respect and who do we want to emulate? Who do we consider worthy of our aspiration? And we should consider that. Today in our society, I think there is a lot of respect, veneration, and even idolizing of people who have very questionable moral values and very questionable behavior and very questionable standing, that maybe they have a lot of power, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of fame, they're very beautiful, they're very gifted in some skill or sport or area, but that's not the reason to honor them or want to be like them. We should look to their character. What are their values? What sort of people are they? Do we want to be that type of person? And so this is something for us to consider. The Buddha said that associating with the wise and endeavoring to emulate and respect and honor those worthy of honor is a path to happiness and success. Then he goes on, and this is like, not necessarily systematic in the way he poses these different conditions for blessings or success or happiness. To reside in a suitable locality, to have performed meritorious actions in the past, and to set oneself in the right direction, this is the greatest blessing. Now, it is, to reside in a suitable locality, again, it is interesting how so much of what one experiences in life, the possibilities that are open to one, and the limitations that are often imposed on one, are a result of where we are born and where we live. If we live in areas where conditions are so negative and so difficult, it's very difficult for us to rise up, to reach higher standing. To be fortunate enough to live in a locality or conditions of peace, where there is relative safety, where there is relative sufficiency of requisites of shelter and clothing, food and medicine, where you have a degree of safety and opportunity to become educated, an opportunity to find work and support yourself, that is a tremendous blessing if you consider the other environments in which so many millions of people exist today, where the struggle for survival is just so grinding down on them and keeping them down, whether it's due to war, whether it's due to famine, poverty, oppression. Any of those conditions make it very difficult for one to rise up and experience the blessings of life, which are good health and a degree of well-being and a degree of possibility of reaching one's highest potentials, intellectually, spiritually. And so this is a wonderful blessing to be born in an environment where we can do this sort of rising up and take on spiritual practice. And if one believes in the law of karma, as Buddhists do, of course, nothing happens by chance. One has to consider, why are some people born in a certain environment, to certain parents, in certain conditions? Why are some people born in very, lovely conditions with very caring parents and very good support systems, and others are born in very poor conditions? And here one can only speculate, but the Buddhist explanation would have to be that the law of karma does play a role in this, is a factor. And the law of karma is basically the law of causes and results, the results that come from the intentional causes. And many of these results manifest over lifetimes, not necessarily over one lifetime. And the Buddhist teaching is that, when we've accumulated a lot of merit, a lot of kusala karma, a lot of good karma, the likelihood is that we will have a good rebirth. So there is better likelihood of that. And of course, just to be born as a human being is already indicating that we have a lot of good karma. To be born with a body with its full faculties and all its limbs, and survive through childhood and have the mental capacity to learn and grow, that is the result of good karma. And so this is having made these meritorious actions in the past is a blessing, certainly. Of course, now we can't change the past, and we actually don't even know how much good karma we made or how much bad karma we made. We certainly must have made a good deal of good karma to be reborn as a human being. But what we can do is take care of the karma that we create in this life. And that is why the Buddha continues with these blessings, where he stresses so much the importance of how we live, how we act, how we speak, how we intend, how we create in this life. And this is something that he will approach in the next verses. And this is, and to set oneself in the right direction. This is, in other words, what is our aspiration? What is our guiding star in this life? I think that is one of the most important things that a human being can establish, especially in young people. What is your guiding star? I mean, what are your aspirations in life? What do you have as a goal in life? And if we can establish purpose and direction that is oriented towards the skillful, the wholesome, that which is good, inclining towards spiritual wholeness, I think that is a tremendous blessing. Rather than instilling the hope and whole purpose of my life is to be famous, to be successful, to be rich, to be powerful. They are aspirations too, but our primary aspiration should be to become a better human being with moral virtue of high standing, that we have self-respect and we feel that we are really living a good life. So that is a very good direction to strive for. Now then the Buddha continues, okay, you want to be happy, you want to live a good life, to have much learning, to be skilled in crafts, to be well trained in moral conduct, and to have speech that is well spoken. This is the greatest blessing. Once again, having established that this is, we have a direction in life. We know the sort of person we want to be, how we want to grow, what we want to do with our lives. This is, we've got a purpose, as it were, a general direction. Not everything is worked out, but we've got values, let's put it that way. And here the Buddha gives some practical advice. Sure, you want to be successful. You want to live a comfortable life. You want to be able to support yourself. You want to be able to be healthy. have a family, be respected. Yeah, okay. Well, you need to be able to also have knowledge, also have skills. You've got to be able to earn a living. So the idea that we cultivate our intellect and cultivate ourselves in order to be able to be a positive contribution to society, so that our presence is worthy and our presence is a contribution to the well-being of society. Yeah, it is very important to not just be a burden on society, but to be in a position to contribute, to be able to be a good citizen. So learning and skill and having a livelihood, having a profession, it is very important. Being of upright conduct, and this is a refrain that the Buddha repeats over and over again, the idea of how we behave, how we act, and how we speak, the importance of virtue, the importance of abstaining from that which is harmful either to oneself or another, to make effort to cultivate that which is beneficial to oneself and others, the importance of karma, action, the intentional action, which is what we do with our bodies, what we create with our bodies, what we bring forth through our speech, and also through our thoughts in order to create positive contribution, positive karma. So in conduct and in speech. And this will be repeated again as we go a little further along here. And here is more practical, advice for those who want to be a positive influence, a positive contribution, and to create blessings in life. And it follows on once we have our values that caring for one's mother and father, supporting one's wife and children, and to be engaged in peaceful occupation. This is the greatest blessing. In all Buddhist countries, the veneration and respect for parents is highly regarded, very, very highly regarded. The Buddha actually said that it does not matter what you do, even if you carry your parents on your shoulders and you feed them and take care of all their needs, you cannot repay the debt that you owe to your parents. But one of the things we can do is to support them and help them when they need our help and when we are in a position to help them, just like they helped us when we were helpless infants. So the idea of this gratitude and respecting one's parents and taking care of them. In the West, we often feel that the preoccupation is with what was wrong with my parents, and many of my problems are due to bad parenting. There may be, I'm not saying that that is not true in many cases. There is always an element of truth. But nevertheless, that we are alive is due to the love of our parents. And it is important that we reciprocate by caring for them as much as we can. And this is something that is, I think, very necessary and very important in all cultures. In our Western culture in particular, with the nuclear family, it's our families are so small now, and it's very important that we care for each other and also, of course, extend that to others. Supporting one's wife and children. Very practical things. The Buddha was very, very concerned about the relationship of within the family framework, the responsibility of the husband to the wife to the husband, the parents to the children to the parents. It was always a reciprocal, mutual support based on gratitude, based on respect, based on generosity, based on caring, on loving. It was never one of oppression, so that the wife was respected by the husband, and then the husband was respected by the wife, and there was this mutual reciprocating, if you wish, caring for. And this is, if we are people of moral standing and virtue, extremely important. And unfortunately, with the lack of moral values in society, quite often these very basic stabilizing conditions that are conducive to well-being and happiness have slipped and deteriorated, and then we see the consequences of so many broken families, so many children without parents, so many parents without anybody to look after them, and that is not the ideal society and not conducive to happiness. To be engaged in peaceful occupation, this is the greatest blessing. Having knowledge and having skills in crafts, of course, we need a livelihood. To be able to earn a living in an occupation that does not exploit, that does not harm, that does not take advantage of others, that does not require us to compromise our values in order to earn a living. That is a great blessing. There are many jobs, many occupations, many ways of earning a living that I'm very grateful I don't have to do, because they are not easy to maintain the quality of virtuous conduct and wholesome speech, wholesome action, wholesome thoughts, and carry out some of those professions and occupations, because they require so many compromises to be made, whether it be in stealing, killing, lying, cheating, somehow or other taking advantage of others. So, it's a blessing to have an occupation that enables me to earn a living without having to hurt others. And if we can choose, we should choose that type of occupation. And here is a few more conditions that the Buddha said were conducive to happiness. Generosity in giving, righteous conduct, assistance to relatives, and to be blameless in action. This is the highest or greatest blessing. Again, virtue, generosity. In Buddhist countries, if you travel to any Buddhist country, one of the things that becomes immediately noticeable and striking is the generosity that the people have. I lived in Thailand. Before I became a monk, I hitchhiked through Thailand and Laos. People were always accommodating, generous. I was just so surprised how generous people were with sharing what they had, because that virtue of generosity is so strongly instilled by the Buddhist culture based on the Buddhist teachings. The 10 paramitas in Theravada Buddhism, the first one, these are the qualities that have to be perfected in order for one to become a Buddha. And the first one is the Dhana Paramita, and it is generosity, translated as generosity, giving, sharing. And that's not only material things, that's giving of one's time, giving of one's attention, giving of one's kindness, and giving materially as well, giving of one's wisdom, giving of one's teachings. So that Buddhist monks, although they do not have anything materially to give, they can teach and they share their teaching, and that is considered their contribution to society. So this Dhana Paramita is very, very strongly emphasized in Buddhist countries, much more so than in Western countries, I think, although it's certainly respected in Western countries as well. But one interesting thing that I noticed is that while in the list of the 10 paramitas, the Dhana Paramita is the first one mentioned, and the second one is the Sila, which is morality, and so it goes on through the 10. But in the scriptures, when it talks about the life of the Buddha, and there's a whole section of the Pali scriptures talking about the past lives of the Buddha, when the Bodhisattva is perfecting these paramitas over many lifetimes. It takes many lifetimes to perfect these paramitas. However, the last paramita to be perfected by the Bodhisattva before he can become the Buddha is the Dhana Paramita. So it's the one you start with and it's the one you finish with, because at its highest level, this quality of giving manifests as complete abandonment of all attachment, which can only arise through enlightenment, and the relinquishing of all ignorance, all greed, and all hatred, and all delusion. So this generosity is something that we stress very much, and we encourage it. And generosity in all directions, in all forms. Righteous conduct, again, is, this is repeated over and over again, the way we conduct ourselves in society, and the way we relate to the community. This includes our relatives, but also extend it beyond your immediate family, your wife, your children, your parents, your relatives, the community at large. So it's something that radiates beyond. Once we have established certain values and certain virtues, that is what we bring forth into the world. So just ideas are good, but we have to then act on them, implement them, live them, and create through them. So having aspirations of virtue and goodness, it's also acting those virtues and goodness into our relationships with society. And righteous conduct, refers to what we do with our bodies and speech, and how we think. And in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha mentions the 10 courses of wholesome action and the 10 courses of unwholesome action. And the unwholesome actions are killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slanderous speech, which is malicious backbiting, by the way, harsh and abusive speech, frivolous, chattering, useless speech, which fills our airways quite a lot, and then to also covetousness is and ill will and wrong views. These are, if you wish, the 10 ways in which we create bad karma, or the 10 unwholesome courses of behaving and creating. And the opposite of those, of course, is loving kindness towards all creatures, generosity rather than taking from people, being restrained in not misusing sexual energy, speaking truthfully, speaking words that are at the right time, and create harmony and unity within people, kind and gentle speech, valuable speech, rather than the opposite. And of course, to try and cultivate the mental attitudes of being contented, or renunciation of the compulsive need to always want more. What do you want? Whatever I don't have. And that's the definition of, one could say, a person who is never going to be happy. Because they will always want something else, because nobody can have everything. And so the idea of contentment and being able to say this is enough, loving kindness and goodwill towards others rather than ill will, and being established in right view, having had the opportunity to reflect on life and having some spiritual guidance that gives us those guidelines for right living. So this is the blameless inaction and righteous conduct, and it is conducive to a happy life. Avoiding evil, abstaining from evil, abstention from intoxicants, and non-negligence in meritorious acts. This is the greatest blessings. So this is more or less another refrain of the same meaning, with the same meaning, like avoiding those 10 courses of unwholesome karma, what we consider to be bad action, and abstaining from them, relinquishing them. And here the Buddha adds one, is abstention from intoxicants. And this is not included in the 10 courses of unwholesome action, but it is one of the 5 precepts that lay Buddhist people are encouraged and praised for undertaking, refraining from intoxicants that lead to negligence. So, and non-negligence in the meritorious acts. So this is again that refraining from doing evil, cultivating all that is good. This is the highest blessing. And here we come to another number of conditions. Respectfulness, humbleness, contentment, gratitude, and timely listening to the Dharma. This is the greatest blessing. Respecting those who are worthy of respect, but also just in general, the way we relate to others. They don't have to be the most brilliant or necessarily even the highest moral people. We can respect other human beings. We should not judge too harshly, too critically. We should be kind and generous in our assessment and begin by respecting others as we would respect ourselves, or want to be respected, want to be treated. And respecting others means that we do not put emphasis on their standing in society, their color, their race, their education, their sex. We begin from this base of respecting the human being before us. And I think that is something that we should set as a baseline, rather than starting off by noticing all the other characteristics before we decide whether this person is worthy of respect. Let's start off from this baseline. We approach the person with an attitude of respect until proven that they are not worthy of associating with. Humbleness. This is an interesting word. What does it mean to be humble? In Buddhism, we talk about pride and conceit. And normally we think of conceit as being, I am much better than those other people. And we think that's conceit. I'm better. I know more. I'm smarter. I'm more handsome. I can't say that really. But in the Buddhist teaching, conceit is much more than that. Conceit is, I am better than, I am equal to, I am lesser than. that is all conceit, because you somehow are preoccupied with yourself, preoccupied with your standing in the ladder, preoccupied with judging and calculating. Let's begin with as mutual respect for oneself and others. And that's to be humble. That's to what it really means to be even-handed, to treat others as oneself and oneself as others. Contentment, oh, what a wonderful blessing that would be, to be contented. And although in our Western culture, it is often considered to be a failing, that you are not ambitious, that you are not striving, that you're not going to create, that you are not going to achieve. Contentment does not mean indolence, laziness, inaction, stupid, hopeless, drop out. Contentment is a wholesome quality. It means that we know what we have to do in our lives to make our lives better. We know what we can do, and we've already mentioned a whole list of things that we can do to make life better. But without contentment, we cannot have peace. We cannot be happy. It doesn't matter how much you achieve, how much you have. There's always more, and you're never going to be satisfied. And then without contentment, you will not feel gratitude for all that you have, for all that we have. And gratitude is so necessary for the feeling of happiness, for the feeling of being whole. You are whole, and when you are whole, you can be a blessing to others as well. As long as you are not whole, you are needy and lacking because you're not contented and you want more, it's hard to be a blessing to others. So these are very important qualities, and I think very much lacking in our Western culture, primarily driven by the market economy, the consumer economy, so driven by the advertising industry, which is forever telling us that we need more. And here we are living on a limited planet with these millions of people who just want to consume ever more and more and more. And that is not a recipe for happiness or sustainability. I think, if anything, it would be good for us in the West to consider contentment as a very high virtue and gratitude as a higher virtue, so that we can stop wanting and consuming what we don't really need. Now, the Buddha here turns, and I'm going to go through this a little faster, a timely listening to the Dharma. And this is like switching now from some practical aspects of living and attitudes to taking time to the Dharma here signifying something of the spiritual life, spiritual teachings. So actually taking time to listen to some spiritual teachings and consider that there is more to life than just the material aspects, even the material well-being. There is more to life than all of those good things, and that is the spiritual aspiration. Patience, compliance, seeing contemplatives, and timely discussion of the Dharma, this is the greatest blessing. This is introducing, again, a little more in the direction of spirituality. Patience here means, being able to accommodate the fact that life isn't a bed of roses. Everybody experiences some pleasure and pain, some success and some failure, some blame and some praise, some health and some sickness. It's just the way life is. And, in order for us to be happy, we have to be able to accommodate both. And so patience is a virtue. The idea that when things are not necessarily to our liking, we can put up with it. We can't control everything. And so it is sometimes when we can't change something, it is necessary to be at peace with it. And so that is patience. Compliance, really what it means is that we are open to advice. We are open to improvement. We are open to seeing the errors or failings in some aspects of our character, behavior, understanding. And this is necessary if we want to improve and grow. And so that is why the teachings from wise people are things that we have to open up to. It does challenge some of our preconceptions. It does challenge some of our own self-importance. And taking time to seek out wise people. This is contemplatives, mean people who really devote their lives to the study and practice of spiritual traditions, not just studying an intellect, but also the practice of it, to actually associate with, become familiar with people of that standing and that quality, so that we can undertake some of their wisdom by listening and then by emulating and learn from them. This is a blessing when we are exposed to such teachers. And if we are inspired by such teachers, then maybe we will be more willing to undertake those practices ourselves. A lot of the spiritual trainings that go beyond just living a moral life, a good life. And this is indicated here by the Buddha when he says self-restrained exercise of holy practice. Now, this is a rather, it's a translation. It doesn't really give you the meaning of what the Buddha was saying there. What this is if you wish, a phrase that reflects a commitment to the spiritual life. When one has come to a point where one really feels drawn to the spiritual life, that this is the goal, that this is something that one wants to apply oneself in order to realize something beyond just the material, worldly well-being, that we somehow have been inspired by hearing the teachings, by seeing the example in these mendicants and teachers and spiritual teachers, if you wish, gurus, and then we are thus inspired, we're willing to take a step beyond, to undertake some special trainings, if you wish. And the special trainings, it need not be monastic training, but it does require specializing one's life. We've all got limited time, limited energy, limited attention. What are you going to devote it to? If you want to be a champion runner, you don't get to be a champion runner or a marathon runner who breaks records by going for a jog once a week. You've really got to train. If you look at anybody who excels in anything, they make that their primary goal in life, and they devote a lot of time and energy and focus in training. So if one, really inspired towards a spiritual goal, such as in Buddhism we say enlightenment, then one would have to streamline one's life in order to make it as probable as possible. And the Buddha gave a lot of indications of what that means. Usually it means simplifying one's responsibilities and duties, simplifying one's life, eliminating a lot of the clutter in one's life, either distractions or obligations and duties. And that's why in the Buddhist tradition there is a monastic tradition, which is a very specialized life where people renounce a lot of the worldly preoccupations, interests, and obligations in order to focus completely on what we consider spiritual training. And this is the training in morality, training in meditation, and training in wisdom. And this is in the Eightfold Path, basically, but very specialized when it comes to the right effort and right mindfulness and right concentration. And that training in the Buddhist context results in an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And this is the kernel of the Buddha's teachings when he realized his enlightenment was the complete understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And the realization of these Four Noble Truths is enlightenment, and the realization of nibbana or nirvana. And he says, this is the greatest blessing. And then he says, a mind unshaken by worldly vicissitudes, sorrowless, free of subtle defilements, blissful mind, this is the greatest blessing. Those who have fulfilled these conditions are victorious everywhere and gain happiness everywhere. This is the greatest blessing for them. So this description, a mind unshaken by worldly vicissitudes, sorrowless, free of subtle defilements, blissful mind, this is the greatest blessing, is basically describing the state of the fully enlightened human being. Beyond the worldly winds, a mind that is peace, a mind that is free. And this is the highest aspiration and the highest blessing. And it is the potential of every human being. So this is the Buddhist discourse on the highest blessings. I hope some of that resonates with you. I hope some of it inspires you to consider how we approach life and how we can make our lives better for ourselves and for others. Remember, my feeling is always that in looking after myself, I look after others. In looking after others, I look after myself. It need not be one or the other. It is both. I can only give to the world what I have within me. And I think that is a great place for us all to start. Thank you so much for listening to me this evening.